What's up YouTube, this is Tubedigga. In this video I'm going to show you a few workflow examples of how to build a song from several sequences in the Akai Mpc Live and Akai Mpc X in standalone mode. So the first thing that I would make sure I've got organised and locked down is my first sequence and all the tracks and programs within that sequence. They need to be renamed and correspond to each other. So you'll notice on my first track I've got sub bass, the drum program sub bass. Second track is named drums, the program's drums, and so on and so forth. Speech, drones, and Christmas. That's all the programs that I'm using for this project, okay? So there's several reasons why this is really important. One of them is this: if we go to the sequence edit tool and then press events, let's say we wanted to copy events from our first track in our first sequence to a different sequence, but this track wasn't named correctly, or it wasn't named at all and it just said track 1 or track 5 or whatever track it was we wanted to copy. We wouldn't then know what was on that. There might be a different program on that track. So that's one reason why it's good to name. We know exactly what sequence we're working in and what track and what program we're also working with. I haven't named the sequence yet, but I will do. But that is also another good thing to start doing, is renaming your actual sequences as well. You'll notice though that I haven't actually named the sequence or renamed the sequence. The reason for that is because we're going to be duplicating the first sequence, and I don't want to name it something that doesn't make sense with the other sequences. So for example, this first sequence I hope to end up as the intro. So if I name that intro now, okay, yeah, I could go and rename my other sequences, but I'm just going to keep that as the default at the moment, and then once I've decided what sections of the song these sequences are, then I will name them to correspond with that. So I hope that all makes sense. The second thing, and this is probably the most important thing, is if you're going to be using the song editor, you can export your songs to audio or an audio mixdown, or you can convert them to a larger self-contained sequence in itself. If you haven't got your tracks correctly organised, let's say for example sub bass is on track 1 in sequence 1, but then later up in sequence 3 for example your sub bass has just been entered onto a different track, you'll run into some quite bad problems when exporting your song, either to an audio file or a sequence itself. It's because the Akai Mpc Live will be looking to see this consistency between the tracks and the programs, and it just won't be able to play back those same notes because those notes will be on different pads, and it will play back all the wrong notes if you've got the same notes triggering off between different programs and tracks. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, just please take my word for it. It's really good practice to just get into the habit of creating one sequence, okay, and then renaming everything, so when you go to duplicate that sequence, everything's consistent. Now this is the way I like to work. I like to create a sequence that's elaborate and brought up to a certain level, so it's got drums, bass, any mid-range sounds, any sound effects, etc. And then once I'm happy with it, I basically duplicate that sequence to other sequences, and then I return to the first sequence and then start stripping the elements out based on how I want to build that track up. So let's first of all go to our second track. Now this doesn't really matter what order we put these in, it just happens that I put my sub bass program in first and then I added a drum program in second. So we're going to do that first because I want to get a basic drum beat in over 2 bars as a guide. Okay, that's all simple enough. Now I'm going to put some note repeat hi-hats in there. So I'm going to overdub. And I've got some 30-second notes in there. And next I'm going to add the sub bass to that. Okay, so that's all good. So at this point, I'd want to start thinking about how to start making this a bit more diverse and have some variation. So 2 bars isn't really going to give me that variation. So now I would make the decision to double the length, maybe once, twice. Let's have 3 times, so we've got 16 bars. So now we've got 16 bars. I like the kick and the snare. The sub bass is totally fine. So I'm going to go up to my drum track and let's just do some modification to those hi-hats. So I'm going to put some 30-second notes into bar 4 for the hi-hats. So the time division is looking at 30-second notes, and once you go into 30-second notes, if you notice, in 60 notes it only gives you the, well, it gives you the whole bar, but once you change to 30-second notes, then you get the option to stay in the first half of that bar or the second half of that bar if you press this field up here. Okay, so it's just those 2 options. Obviously, if you got to 64, you get additional pages to deal with the 64th notes. So we can see that we've got 30-second notes at the end of bar 4 there. So maybe let's just fill all those up and just do a sweep like that. Let's see how that sounds. Okay, that was quite a nice little effect. So I'm happy with that. Now I'd like to copy that over the next few bars to fill up the 16 bars. So I'm going to go to my sequence edit tool again. I'm going to go to events, and I'm just going to copy from bar 1 to bar 5. So that will capture those 4 bars, and it will copy it from the start of bar 1. And I'll make 4 copies to cover our 16 bars. So I'm just going to press replace. Back to our main page, and that should play back quite nicely with those hi-hats happening every 4 bars. So now let's add in some more elements. Let's add in the drones. So these drones are the same drones that came from my other soundscape and drones video, where I took a short bell sound and stretched them out over a long period of time to get that really nice drone effect. So for the drones, I'm going to put in these 4 pads. But I'm going to spread that out over these 16 bars. That's all good. Let's get the Christmas sounds in there. So I've got these nice samples from this Christmas song by Nat King Cole. So I'm going to put those in to complement the sequence now. Okay, so they work really nice. They're in the same key, especially that last one. I really like the way it kind of morphs into the last chord of those drones in the drone program. I think it's just the speech we need to add. I'd like to add this sample.
Come closer into the light.
Come closer into the light. So I think I'm going to add that towards the end of the 16 bars. So every time the sequence changes, we get that nice speech sample to lead it in to the change-ups that I'm going to do later on in the track. So I think I need to time stretch that speech sample so it fits a bit better with the tempo of our track. So I'm going to go to Menu, Sample Edit. Here's our sample, the light. I'm going to press Process. And this is just a case of trial and error now. So I'm going to reduce the tempo. I don't know if you guys can see that on there. It's a bit washed out on the camera, but at the moment it's saying the tempo is 298, which is obviously, you know, not correct necessarily, but I'm going to bring that down to 268. So I'm going to reduce it by 20 beats per minute. Press do it.
Come closer into the light.
I'm going to try it on the first step of bar 16. Okay, so that needs mixing a bit better, but I'm going to leave that for now. So this is pretty much all the elements that we need to then make the decision where we're going to go next. So I want to now duplicate this sequence to additional sequences, and then I'm going to return to this sequence, treat this first sequence as my intro, and start stripping away the elements that I don't want in the intro. So I'm going to press my sequence edit tool and copy sequence. I'm going to copy it to sequence 2. Then I'm going to copy sequence 2 to sequence 3, copy sequence 3 to sequence 4, sequence 4 to sequence 5, and that should do us 5 sequences. Okay, so I'm going to return to my first sequence, and now I'm going to rename this to intro, so we know that we're working with our intro. I'm going to go back to my first track with the sub bass, and I'm just going to press my erase button, and I'm going to erase the bass because I don't want the bass in the intro. And I also don't want the drums in the intro, so I'm going to erase those. I want to keep the speech, but I don't want the Christmas sounds in there. I want to bring them in a little bit later on just to add those to build the track up. So I'm going to erase those from my intro sequence. So it's pretty sparse now because we've just got the drones in there and the speech sample. So on my 4th pad of my drum program, I've got this hi-hat with a delay on it. Okay, so I'm going to put some of those notes in. I'm probably going to use the note repeat just to give us a nice little percussive timing reference if you wanted to mix this track in a live mixing environment. It would help DJs immensely rather than just having a drone with no tempo reference. So I'm going to put those in. So I went a little bit off with the 30-second notes there. So I'm not too concerned about the 30-second notes because we've got the delay effect on those hi-hats. So I'm going to time correct them to 16th notes. So I copied what is now our intro to all the other sequences. So we know that our second sequence has got all our elements in it. So I'm going to go up to my second sequence. And now I want the drums to be introduced in our second sequence, but I don't want the sub bass. So I'll erase the sub bass, keep the drums, speech is fine. I want to now erase the Christmas sounds again because I still don't want those to come in as yet. So I'm going to erase those as well. Okay, so now our second sequence is essentially the same as the intro, minus the hi-hats with a delay because we don't really need those now. We could put those in, but now because we've got the drums coming in, we don't really need those hi-hats at the moment. I might put them in if it actually complements the track. And now we can just literally move on to sequence 3. And with sequence 3, again, I don't want the bass to come in yet. It's too early, so I'm going to delete that. And now I would like the jazz or Christmas sounds to come in, or the string sounds in that program. So I'm just going to leave that because we know they're in there already because we duplicated our first sequence, which is now the intro. So I'm going to play that back. Cool, so that all sounds great. Now I'm going to treat my fourth sequence as the breakdown, because I know I've got another sequence after that, the fifth sequence, and I think that's where I'm going to kick off the sub bass. So the fourth sequence, we need to keep the Christmas string samples, keep the drones, keep the speech. I might keep the drums in there and then maybe filter those drums down as we get towards the end of the bar before the bass kicks in on our fifth sequence. So we don't want the sub bass in there, so I need to delete the sub bass, do it. So we've got our fourth sequence, this is our breakdown. Now I'm going to go to my second track with the drums. So let's go to our channel mixer and let's take a look at the drum program. We've got this low pass filter already loaded into there, and it's just set as its default value at the moment. So I need to press and hold Q link, make sure I'm in project mode because that's the mode best for this project. I'm going to press Q link edit. And now I'm going to choose my first Q-Link knob, this one here, to control the insert for the program. So we're in program here. We need to change the program to drums. So double tap on that and select the drum program. And then it's our second insert actually. We need to change that to frequency. So let's play the sequence back, and I'll just adjust this bottom Q-Link knob here, this one. And that should adjust our cut off of the drums. So this is our breakdown, and I've just got to now choose how to automate the low pass filter cut off. So this is a nice lead in to the fifth sequence where we're going to introduce the sub bass. So I'm going to put it into right automation mode. I think what I'm going to do is just gradually bring the low pass filter down for the first 8 bars and then maybe start to reintroduce it for the last 8 bars of this 16 bar sequence. So I'm going to come out of right automation mode, and that should lead us nicely into our fifth sequence. So let's go up to our fifth sequence, and that's where we want our sub bass to come in. I want the drones to stop dead. Now the drones program is monophonic, so all I need to do to stop those dead, because otherwise they'll trail over from the last bar of sequence 4 into sequence 5. It's really easily done. You literally just add a ghost note in that has no sample on it. So I need to go back to sequence 4, go to grid editor, make sure I've selected pad 13, which doesn't have a sample on it. If we just cut it off on the start of bar 13, because we get that string sound, so maybe it would be nice for that to just cut dead there. So there's our ghost note, and that should cut off that last drone pad there that I just played back. So I'm going to play this sequence all the way through, and we'll just listen to that cut off. So not too bad. I think I probably need to just erase the kicks. They didn't sound too great, and the snare as well, I think. So I'm going to choose note again. I'm going to go up to bar 16, where we know that we've still got some elements in there. So I'm going to get rid of the kick and the snare, and I'm going to keep in those hi-hats to lead us into our fifth sequence. So I'm going to press do it, and let's not play the whole thing back again. Let's just play it from bar 9 just to check that that sounds okay. And now on sequence 5, we know that this was a duplicate of the very original sequence. So now all we have to do is get rid of the drones out of there. So I'm going to erase the drones from that. I'm also going to erase the Christmas samples. Now we can check all of this in context by going to the song mode, and we just press insert. I'm going to press it 5 times so we've got enough slots for all of our sequences. I'm going to choose the first sequence, turn the data wheel, we've got intro, then we've got sequence 2, sequence 3, sequence 4, sequence 5. And because they're all in order, I've actually constructed those sequences to run in order. I don't really need to rename those. In other tracks that I've made, sometimes I've got these named exactly, like chorus, bridge, second verse. But for this, because the sequences have been built up in order, this is completely fine and I know exactly where I'm at. So now I'm going to play back the entire thing, and then thereafter we're going to export that to a larger sequence. Just sit back and enjoy this, guys. I'm going to play the thing in its entirety and just see how it's all working together at this stage.
Come closer into the light. Come closer into the light.
So now it's just a case of deciding what to do next. We could go to our song edit and export this whole thing as a individual sequence on its own by converting to sequence, and then we could just deal with that one sequence on its own and not worry about the song, because obviously when the song's playing back you can't really do any other editing, you're kind of locked into song mode. So it is more flexible to convert to a longer sequence. So I'm going to do that, do it. Now if we switch to sequence 6, it says from song. So I'm going to rename that to Dark Light 1 as the name. So just delete the from bit at the start there, press do it. So now we know this is our song that we've exported from the song editor in its entirety. And as you can see, it's 80 bars now. Any comments or questions, please put them down below. Please like, subscribe and share if you haven't already done so. Please do check out my Patreon, chuck us $1, give me a bit of support so I can continue doing these videos for you guys on YouTube. And I will see you in the next one. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.